Hey, Mom. Look at you sporting black today. I hope it's not because of a bad occasion.
Oh, it's Spider-Man. Oh, cool.
My favorite. Huh? Look at you sporting black today.
Oh,
I
well.
hope it's not because of a bad occasion. Is this technical issue happening again?
Well, welcome again to one of our behavior streams. Sorry, I'm running late. Well, I run late on occasion, but I don't think I've ran this late before, so many apologies, I you know, you might think like, oh, okay, like he was late like always, prepping his lecture and getting it ready for the live stream. And you'd be kind of wrong. I actually got that done earlier today. Surprisingly, I got it done earlier today. However, because I got it done early, I start to prep dinner for my family. Okay. And so I was prepping something my wife didn't know how to cook. So I had to make sure I got most of it done before hopping onto the stream here. So you'll have to excuse me for that. All righty. So enough about my excuses. I always have a lot of excuses, so we're going to hop right into our lecture today, which is continuing our series on applied behavior analysis done the right way, the ABA Bears way. All right. Now, again, we've broken this whole series down into a couple of divisions, right? The first one being behavior management, because at the core of it, we feel that that is the most important piece of the puzzle. Because if you can't manage your child's behaviors, it actually doesn't matter how many skills your child has, they will never display it when the need calls for it in real life situations, right? So we're tackling the teaching skill side because we went over the behavior management side a lot. So refer back to those streams if you want to get caught up. But today we're going to focus on the teaching side, and we're continuing with where we left off, which is talking about discrete trial training and the stages of acquisition. All right. Remember, discrete trial training is based off of operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is learning through the consequences of our actions, and the consequences of teaching are either the informational no or reinforcement when they do something right. Okay, so it's all embedded in there so that, oh, when I tell the child to do something, and whatever it is that they do, if they do it right, I'm going to provide reinforcement for them. If they do it wrong, I'm going to give them an informational no. Now, those are the three main components of a discrete trial, which is the instruction, the response, and the feedback. And we devoted, I think, like a whole lecture just to prompting. We might have devoted two. I don't even remember. But prompting is that important. Prompting is that difficult to learn, okay, to do it right. Anybody can prompt, but you have to be very, very good at doing it the right way in order to maximize what you're likely to gain. All right. Now, the prompt is any help that we give the learner, okay? Anything, okay? And we went over, oh, deliberate prompts versus accidental prompts. And our job when we're training staff is to eliminate all the accidental prompting, okay? The prompting that they did not intend to give the child. All right. Now, finally, after recapping all of that stuff, we get to our what we're going to talk about today. So when we take a look at teaching under discrete trial, we have two different items there. Okay, we have acquisition item, which is the item that the child is currently learning. And then we have mastered items, right? And mastered items are any skills that we've taught previously that the child for sure knows. Okay. Now, acquisition items go through these stages of teaching, okay? And we go through these stages until we're certain the child knows them. They start at mass trials, they move on to expanded trials, and then we check it, making sure that they know it through a check for mastery. Okay. All right, now when do you actually run a check for mastery? You know, we went over like a mass trial, how that looks. We went over an expanded trial, how that looks. So what is the qualifications for us to like, oh, it's time to run a check for mastery? You run a check for mastery when the child is completely successful at expanded trial 3 level. Okay, that means that they are 100% with both the acquisition item and all the distractor items up to 3 distractors. Remember last time I said like, oh, the expanded trial can keep on going. It can, but you don't need to. Okay, you would only keep going if for whatever reason you think your child kind of like, okay, after this amount of distractors, that's when they start to lose it, you know? That's when you can like, okay, adapt what you do. But for our purposes, for most of the kids that we work with, 3 distractors is sufficient to let us be confident when we are kind of working on it, the child has actually retained the information and is discriminating against these distractor items. Okay. All right. So what is a check for mastery? A check for mastery is just it's literally what the name tells you. It's a check. Okay. Do you know it or do you not know it? Okay, that's all that a check for mastery is. Okay. Did you learn the acquisition item or not? Now, for us, I'm going to go over the very, very stringent criteria that we have set up to make sure that something has been learned, the acquisition item has been mastered. So the first thing is we check it twice so we run 2 check for mastery sittings, okay? And in each sitting, we're targeting the acquisition item 2 times. Right? There's a lot of 2s, right? Okay. And we have to work at least against 3 different MIs in the same program. Okay. Now, you might be wondering like, well, what if they don't have 3 MIs? Oh, you work with what you have, okay? We only say at least 3 for those programs where you have a multitude of MIs, so you want to make sure that there's some distance between the time that you ask for the acquisition item and then when you come back to the acquisition item. Okay. All right, so let's kind of delve into it more. What is the specific criteria? Now, since we target the acquisition item twice in one sitting, in order for us to say the child has mastered a skill, the child has to perform at 100%, 2 out of 2 times with the acquisition item. Okay. However, with the MIs, right, with all the other mastered items the child has, they need to perform at least at 80%. Okay. Why that difference, you might be asking? Like, well, why would you have that discrepancy between one and the other? Okay. Well, the thing is that none of us are perfect in our responding. Okay? Like, oh, sometimes we get distracted. Somebody asks us something. We answer a question that we thought we heard, okay, but we didn't actually answer the question correctly. Right? And that happens to all of us. It's happened to me, It's embarrassing when somebody asks like, oh, what's your name and address? But they weren't talking to me. They're talking to somebody else. And I start talking, right? Like, okay, so it happens to the best of us, okay? So that's why we give leeway with mastered items for the child to make those kind of random errors in there. So the check for mastery is passed. They succeeded at that check for mastery if they are perfect with the acquisition item, 2 out of 2, and they score at least 80% with the mastered items. Now, remember I said there's a couple twos in there? Well, you target the acquisition item 2 times in one sitting, okay? But you have to run a check for mastery 2 times. And for us, we try to, as much as possible, have it be checked by another therapist, okay? Because we want to make sure that the skill is generalized across multiple people, not just with one individual. Right? Now, this is an example of what a check for mastery sitting might look like. So you target an MI, you target the acquisition item, and then you target another MI, another MI, another MI, and then you come back to the acquisition item. For us, once we come back and the child's successful, there's no reason for us to keep going and do more trials because the child's proven like, oh, they can do it. Plus, honestly, all you parents out there, they're super gung-ho. You'll keep your child in the chair for like 10, 20 minutes, even though like in the first minute, they already showed you that they were successful, okay? And instead, you're like, oh, I'm going to bring every little bit. And then what you start to see is this like, oh, okay, they're doing well. Okay, they're not doing so great. Oh, they're doing horribly, like, and it's learning to take your victories, take those wins on the upswing, all right? So that's why we end it when we come back to the acquisition sitting. Now, generally speaking, for us, you're going to target the acquisition in one of the first 3 slots, okay? And the reason we want to do that is that we just want to randomize where the acquisition item is, because when we've been teaching it in mass trials and expanded trials, it always starts with the acquisition item, right? When we're testing it, we want it to be random. It could be anywhere when we get started, okay? All right. So it could be in the middle position, the first position, that kind of thing. So it just creates a situation where you're no longer predictable, right? Like, oh, what happens, what you see. Okay, the child can't reasonably be like, oh, okay, I can guess already what you're going to ask me. And instead of actually paying attention and actually doing it correctly, because they kind of have guessed what you're going to ask, they'll just say it and they aren't even paying attention to the task. Okay? Long-winded explanation for why it has to be one of the first 3 items there. All right. Now, let's say that this is an example of a perfect check for mastery sitting. Okay, and we're checking colors for mastery, right? So blue is the acquisition item. They got it correct both times, so that's 100%, right? Then you have all these MIs, and the MIs, there are 5 of them. They did all 5 correctly. That's 5 out of 5. That's 100%. Easy, clear, successful check for mastery sitting, okay? Now, remember, you have to run 2 of these, okay? Like, and generally not in the same session, okay? Like, you're trying to make sure across time and, the child's remembering all of this information. So you're running it a second time, okay, in another sitting, okay? And then once the child's successful with that, that's when you can consider the acquisition item has been mastered. All right. Now, the last time, and it was same for this time, it took a long time for me to set up all these kind of like kind of organized examples of kind of like, oh, how you organize things and things like that. And hopefully everyone gained a lot of valuable lessons from kind of me going through this arduous task of kind of like creating these things for you. Okay. All right. So Hold on a second, water break. All right. So now we went over the organizational method last time for expanded trials. And today we're going to go over the data collection method or the organizational method that we use for check for mastery. Now, here in the US, and we've done it in Korea as well, all MIs for us are written on note cards. Okay, they're like 4x6 or 5x7 note cards, and we'll have those items. So every time a child masters something, it becomes like a card. Okay. And so let's say that, in receptive instruction, stand up is the item on acquisition. And then all of these ones down here are mastered items. Okay. Now, remember, we're going to use a very, very similar method that we did with the expanded trials when we're taking data. We're going to have a very, very tiny gap for the acquisition item. Okay. So remember, our acquisition items stand up. Because stand-up is always going to be in our hand, it's never going to be part of the pile. That's where this gap comes in between. This little or no gap represents a correct response to the acquisition item. Okay? A big gap tells me you did the acquisition item incorrectly. Okay? For MIs, we're going to lay it out exactly in the orientation that all those cards are when the child responds correctly to them. But then we'll just change the orientation 90 degrees if they're wrong. All right. So let's say that we start with jump. Okay. The child gets a correct response. Okay. We put the card down. Okay. We ask for the acquisition item. Stand up, they get it right. Okay, we keep it in our hand. Okay, we ask for clap, they get it correct. Okay, we put that card down. You see that very, very minimal gap between jump and clap. That gap means that stand up was correct. Okay, now we're gonna go to a mastered item. Okay, but the child gets it wrong. I told them to touch toes, but they touch their knees instead. Oh no. All right. Well, what do you do at this point? Okay. Well, you tell them no, right? And then you ask again. Okay. If they get this correct, great. Okay. It just means that for whatever reason, they might have misheard you. They just weren't paying 100% attention, but they get it correct. Okay. With this, you can just move on. All right. Now, this type of prompting is called a no prompt for strategy for mastered items. Okay, so it's a no prompt strategy. Okay, what that means is that when I'm working on MIs or in a check for mastery, working on all these items that are MI, when the child gets the MI incorrect, I'm going to give them one no. I'm going to repeat my instructions. And only if they get another no, the next trial, I'm going to prompt them. Okay, so that's what that no prompt means. It's like, oh, for mastered items, you get it wrong the first time. I tell you no, I'm going to give you another chance to get it right. You get it wrong again. That's where it's like, uh-oh, did you forget the item? Like, because now you need help. And so that's where the prompt comes in. Right? Now we go and we do touch toes. Because touch toes is incorrect, so we have the incorrect. They got it correct on the second trial. We reorient it and place it down. Okay. We ask for a pat tummy. They get it correct. Correct orientation for that. I ask for touch head. They get that correct. I ask for stand up again. Okay. And they get that correct. So you take a look at here. There's no gap there, and they finished it correctly. So stand up was 2 out of 2, 100%. Now, if I spread these cards out, what you'll see here is for mastered items, it was, hold on, did I do this right? 2, 4, 5. Yes, sorry. I can't count even as I'm doing the lecture here. Okay, so for here, jump was correct, clap was correct, touch was incorrect, touch toes was incorrect, but then they got it correct. Pat tummy was correct, touch head was correct. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6 total trials. That's 83%. And guess what? You have 100% with the acquisition item. You have 83% with the mastered item. That is a successful check for mastery sitting. And the child has passed that check for mastery. All right. So you must wonder then, like, okay, if that's what happens with with the mastered item, okay, like, oh, they get it wrong one time and then they correct it, you can still be successful with the check for mastery. Well, what happens when you get an error with the acquisition item? Okay. Well, you need 100%. Okay. And me, despite being bad at math, I know you can't get 100% if you get one of them wrong. Okay. So that check for mastery has failed. Okay. Then what you have to do is you have to go into prompting procedures until the child's able to get that acquisition item independently. Okay. Once they can get it independently, then you'll move it into an expanded trial. Okay. And in an expanded trial, you're working on kind of building that up again until the child's able to successfully get back to the third distractor level before you attempt another check for mastery. All right, so here's an example. So they do jump correct, which is a mastered item. They do arms up correct, which is another mastered item. Bam! All right. I asked for stand up. They give me incorrect response. Okay. Acquisition item means you don't follow the no prompt strategy. The no prompt strategy is only for mastered items. Anytime that you're teaching something and the child fails at it, you have to provide enough help for the child to be successful. And in this case, when they get this one wrong, I tell them no. The very next time I ask again, but I'm providing enough help for them to be successful. Okay. So that's what happens. I'm going to get them successful, and then I'm going to prompt them to independence. Okay, so it requires 2 prompts. I'm going to use 2 prompts. If it's 3 prompts, I'm going to use 3 prompts. Here, successful with only being able to use 1 prompt. So I prompted you. You were able to get back right on the horse. Okay. Now, it's at this point that you have to go into an expanded trial. Okay? So you go to 1 distractor, you come back. They're successful, you go to 2 distractors, and then you come back. Okay? So when you take a look at here, this is where they failed the check for mastery. Okay? With the acquisition item, they were incorrect. You go into corrective procedures, you prompt them until they were independent, and then you put them into an expanded trial. Okay? And here in this expanded trial, because I was able to get the child successful at the 2nd distractor level, I'm taking my win. I'm getting out of here. Okay. Now, most parents are like, no, I'm going home. I'm going to go 3 and I'm going to get them back into it. No, take your wins. Get them successful. Get them out of the chair. The next time you can call them over. Okay. And then work on it more. Okay, start again at 1 distractor, move to 2 distractor, get to the 3rd distractor. They can clear all those. Then you go back into a check for mastery in the following sitting. Okay. All right. Now in a check for mastery sitting, you can cheat. Okay, like anybody can cheat. Okay, if you're like, oh, you know what? If I use car, the child's going to confuse cat with car. So when I do a check for mastery, I'm just going to omit car. Okay? That way, the child can easily clear a check for mastery. You can cheat that way. Okay? Doesn't benefit your child whatsoever. You have to have high standards. And when we work on this check for mastery, we make sure that we are targeting all the MIs that the child's most likely going to confuse in expanded trials and especially in a check for mastery to make sure that when we say the child knows something, they absolutely know it. All right, so now that was a check for mastery, okay? Now, remember at the onset we said we had acquisition sittings, and those acquisition sittings go through stages of acquisition like mass trials, expanded trials, check for mastery. Then we have something called MI sittings. And MI sittings are just us practicing all the child's MIs in a program. Okay? And we do this to make sure that the child has learned what we want them to learn. Okay? So that, oh, okay, it's, it's one of those things that most people don't quite understand. You work with your child to teach them something. Guess what happens when you stop kind of like keeping it up? Child's going to forget. Okay? So you have to then make sure you're practicing these skills that you taught the child sufficiently enough so that they retain it over time. Okay? So after a certain amount of practice, it gets committed to long-term memory. All right? Now, let me talk a little bit about the way that we organize things here. We like it very, very organized. So for all mastered items, if there are pictures, we use pictures. If there are not pictures, then we like to use like printed word cards, like we'll print them on those labels. We'll stick them on the index cards, and the index cards are all of the child's mastered items. And then we'll differentiate the piles. In one pile, we have what we have already worked on, and the pile that's not done yet. Okay, so we have those two piles. Now, what happens is that when we run an MI sitting, we'll just grab a stack from the not done pile, we shuffle the cards, then we use those as our targets when we're teaching the child. Okay? Now, if the child gets them all correct, great. All of those cards go into that done pile. And we're going to keep on working on the not done pile until that pile is all practiced, and then everything resets again. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. That way we ensure that every item gets practiced and every item is targeted so that the child doesn't lose any of the skills that we previously taught. All right. Now, MI sittings are generally practiced every third time that you call a child over to learn a particular program. So what it would kind of look like would be, oh, I'm targeting an acquisition item sitting, and we might be doing mass trials. Okay, the next day, the next session, we target another acquisition item sitting, and that's also in mass trials. The following session, oh, I'm going to practice MIs. Okay. Then the next session after that, okay, we go back to acquisition sitting. We're still at mass trials. And then the next one, we go into an expanded trial. But now we're on the third one again. And that one, we target the MI. Now, the progression would kind of like how it would actually look like in an acquisition item sitting with me kind of taking out the MIs as a part of it might look something like this. Okay. So we introduced something in mass trials. It took 3 prompts before the child was completely independent by the 4th one. I celebrate with the child on the 4th one. I let them go play. The next time I call them over, the very next session, I called them over and they only needed 1 prompt before they were independent. Heavily reinforced the child, let them go. Next sitting, okay, I called the child over immediately, able to get it. First try, ooh, big celebration with the child, letting them go. Okay. Then the next sitting, I'm going to call them over, and then I was able to successfully get them from expanded child 1 to expanded child 2. Okay, but they struggled maybe a little bit at 2, so I was only able to end with a success at level 2. The very next sitting, I'm able to successfully get them 1, 2, and 3. Okay? That's when they go into a check for mastery. They go into check for mastery, they're successful the 1 time, the very next session, I'm checking it again, or somebody else is checking it. And then if they are successful there, it means that the item has been mastered. Hold on 1 second. I'll be right back. Check the fire. Move some stuff around. All right, it's looking good. It's looking good. All right. Okay, so let's say that this is a MI sitting of shapes. Okay. Now, remember good retention. Like, oh, the child's able to remember the items. We're happy with any retention level above 80%. All right. So let's give an example of what that MI sitting might actually look like with incorrect responses here. Okay. So when you take a look at here, the child gets vehicles wrong. And of course, this we're working on like categories, right? They get vehicles wrong, but then I give them a no. They were able to be successful with it again. Okay. What you'll see is I'll target vehicles again after I worked on the other categories that the child knows. And I do that just because I want to make sure you know it. Like I want to make sure, because the thing is, if I'm not sure, and the next time I'm working on an acquisition item, that's going to mess up in expanded trials, or it's going to mess up in the check for mastery. And I don't want that. So when I'm working on here, oh, okay, well, you slipped a little bit. So at the very end, I'm just going to target it again, make sure solid with this, okay? So when you take a look at the ratio and then the percentage, this is 8 out of 9 correct, 89%. The child's retaining information well. Okay? Now, in this example, okay, let's say that the child gets vehicles wrong. They say furniture first. I ask again. So this is the no prompt strategy. Okay. So I ask for vehicles again. They tell me it's numbers. I say no again. Now I need to prompt. What are they? Vehicles, right? I prompt them. They're successful. And then I'm able to get them to be independent in the very next trial. Now it's at this point that you go into an expanded trial for vehicle. Okay. Why do we do that? Well, it looks like you forgot vehicles, right? Like when you make that error here, I gave you 2 chances, you failed at both chances, then I had to help you out. The problem then is like maybe you forgot it. Okay, there's a good chance you forgot it. So let us make sure that you're going to be really successful when I target it again in an MI sitting. Okay. So you go through expanded trials for vehicle. Okay. So here, clothing is distractor 1. You go back to vehicles, they're successful. Numbers, food are distractor level 2. And then you come back to vehicles. They're successful. They're successful at the 2 distractor level. Okay. So in this type of sitting, we're going to continue with the expanded trials for vehicle until vehicle is successful at the 3 distractor level. But we're not done there yet, okay? They're successful at 3 distractor level. Then we're going to run another MI sitting with vehicles in there. And as long as they're successful there, now it's at this point that I can go back to kind of normal operation. Now, a lot of our current programs, okay, the programs that are meant to be run every session, okay, because the whole premise is that every session you're targeting all the skills you want the child to learn. The hard part for parents is like, oh, they need this, they need this, they need this, and they overload the programs. Like they have too many programs that they're working on. And then the problem is that the child just does not get enough practice with any one program to get very proficient at that program. So for us, how we design the program is making sure that every therapist, when the child doesn't have like a very long protest behavior during a session, that they're able to run all of the programs on the child's program checklist. So we work on that until the child has mastered that skill. Once a child has mastered that skill, then we got to make sure that the generalization has taken place. So then we have to actively test this skill with other people in other situations other than where they learned it. We ask those questions outside in the park, and we might alter the stimuli. So when we ask for, if something is a phone, I make sure I get variations of how different phones look, and that the child can still identify, oh yes, it doesn't matter the exact look of it, I can still know that that is a phone. Now then, if a skill is used every day, then what we try to do is we track it. We track like, oh, okay, are they able to do it on an everyday basis and maintain the level that we've taught them? Okay. We call this a daily living skill because they're going to have to perform it every day. Things that are daily living skills are things like dressing, brushing teeth, getting dressed, washing hands, and, washing hands takes forever. Okay, like it just takes forever. From the point that we start, literally most of our kids like take 2 or 3 years because there's always backsliding. They're playing with the water, they're playing with the bubbles, they're just zoning out, all of those kind of things, and then we finally get to the point like, oh, okay, I'm just checking up on how well they're doing. So what we do is we send them to the bathroom. We might be right outside the bathroom listening to make sure that they're doing everything right. If we have a CCTV camera, we'll put in the bathroom before we have them go in there to wash their hands. And then we'll make sure that, when they wash their hands, they're using all the correct strategies that we taught them. Invariably, all the kids fail at this. When they're like, oh, no therapist around, I'm just skipping steps, I'm rushing through the process. It always happens, right? We re-enter, re-establish, we fade out again. But for us, we want to make sure that the child's still maintaining the skill outside of our presence, okay, in their everyday life. Now, there's some skills that you don't practice on an everyday schedule. They're just some things that like, when object labels, there are millions of object labels, right? And so sometimes some object labels you will not come across with for a week or longer. So for those type of programs, then we put them on what we call a maintenance schedule. So a current schedule is when we practice everything every single session. A maintenance session, we might I'm sorry, a maintenance schedule is when we practice it, 3 times a week. Okay. And that practice is only with the MIs, and it's working in kind of like not as structured of a way, but it's making sure the child's retaining all of those skills, even though we don't work on it as frequently. As they kind of get better and better with that, and we can see it in the percentage, then we can reduce the frequency. So we go from 3 times a week to 2 times a week to 1 time a week to 1 time a month to once every other month. And then by that time, we're pretty sure the child has ingrained that skill into long-term memory. And then that's the time that we discontinue that program, is when we're sure that the child's never going to forget this information. You worked hard to achieve a certain level of success. You worked really hard to do it. It's a pain working with your own kids. Okay. Like it's for those people that find it easy to work with their own kids. My hat's off to you. Okay. Because it is not for us, for a lot of people. Okay. It's one of the hardest things. If you're doing ABA with your own kids, it's one of the hardest, most grueling, most stressful things that you can do. Okay? So because it's such a massive endeavor, you don't want to have all that hard work, both by you and the child, go to waste. Okay? You don't want to squander it. You took all that time and energy and effort to be successful at getting them to know the item. Don't forget to practice it. Okay? Practice it. Practice it. Doesn't have to be on the exact same schedule. You just practice it less frequently, and then you continue to practice it less and less frequently until you're sure there's no way my child's going to forget these skills. Okay? And it's at that time that then you can just, all right, this program, gone. All right? Woo! All right. So hopefully that helps everybody. Today, this kind of wraps up our talk on discrete trial training. The next time we delve into non-contingent teaching. The funny thing is, non-contingent has taken over for the most part as our main method of teaching most language-based programs. Okay, and next time I'll go over why and all that stuff. But that's what we'll do the next time, is work and talk about non-contingent teaching. All right. Oh, my daughter came back. These are her birds that she drew. Oh, wait, let me shut this. So everybody get a good look. Yay! So that's my daughter's art class. All right. So thanks again, everyone. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come and what do you have to say? What do you say? What do you say? Did you forget? Yeah.
안녕하세요.
She always forgets. How sad. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, like I was saying, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend with us. Remember, any questions that you have, please write down in the cafe, write into our stream. We'll get to them once we kind of wrap up this whole kind of thing where I'm just kind of regurgitating everything that I know about applied behavior analysis. And then we'll try to, as diligently as possible, go over all the questions that you have. Now, before you go, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and please Tell all your friends about us. All right. Well, good to see everybody again, and we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.